Dana, Ireland. On the afternoon of Christmas Eve, 1991, 23-year-old Dana Marie Ireland left for a bike ride from her parents' rental home in Kapoho Vacationland, in the Puna district of Hawaii's Big Island. She was visiting for the holidays, cycling approximately 8 miles to invite a friend to dinner. The ride should have been simple. Around 5 in the evening, witnesses on Kapoho Kai Drive discovered a collision scene. Tire tracks, a mangled black bicycle, a white tennis shoe, and clumps of blonde hair scattered across the road. 30 minutes later, and 5 miles away, a woman found Dana lying in bushes along Wa'a Road, a fishing trail. She was barely conscious. She had been struck by a vehicle, taken, assaulted, and severely beaten. Dana was transported to Hilo Medical Center, where she passed from blood loss and multiple traumatic injuries shortly after midnight on Christmas Day. Dana was born December 12, 1968, in Virginia, bright, athletic, and beloved by her family. Crime scene evidence included the mangled bicycle, a bloody Jimmy Z brand t-shirt found at the fishing trail, tire tracks at both scenes, and critically, DNA recovered from Dana's body, hospital gurney sheet, her underwear, combings, and the t-shirt. All DNA pointed to a single unknown male, dubbed Unknown Male Number 1. Witnesses reported seeing a pickup truck at both locations. Despite intense media coverage and a reward that grew over the years, the case went cold. The evidence sat in storage, waiting for technology that did not yet exist. In May 1994, John Gonsalves, facing decades in prison for a conspiracy charge, tipped police that his half-brother Frank Pauline Jr. had information. In exchange, Gonsalves received only probation. Pauline named brothers Albert Ian Schweitzer and Sean Schweitzer as those responsible, claiming he was present. He was interviewed at least 7 times and gave wildly inconsistent accounts each time. In July 1996, Pauline fully recanted, admitting he fabricated the story to help his half-brother make a deal. Despite the recantation, all 3 men were indicted in October 1997. DNA testing definitively excluded all 3 as contributors of the biological evidence. Charges were dismissed in October 1998, but in a move that stunned legal observers, all 3 were re-indicted in May 1999, based partly on jailhouse informant Michael Ortiz's claim that Ian confessed to him. The prosecution pushed forward without the DNA and built its case on the testimony of people who had every reason to lie. Frank Pauline was convicted and sentenced to 180 years. Ian Schweitzer, who refused plea deals and maintained his innocence through every hearing and every offer, was convicted and sentenced to 130 years. Sean, watching both men convicted despite the exculpatory evidence, took a plea deal to a lesser charge and received probation, later saying the confession was false and made only to avoid spending his life behind bars. The Innocence Project began reviewing Ian's case in 2005. University of Hawaii law students sifted through over 65,000 pages of materials, one of the largest case files in the state's history. In 2017, additional testing on the Jimmy Z t-shirt confirmed the habitual wearer was Unknown Male Number 1, and all defendants were excluded. New expert analysis also debunked tire tread evidence that had supposedly linked Ian's Volkswagen Beetle to the scene and established that an injury on Dana's body was not a bite mark, as the prosecution had claimed. On January 24, 2023, Judge Peter K. Kubota vacated Ian Schweitzer's conviction and ordered him released from his shackles immediately after more than 25 years of incarceration. He had entered prison as a young man and walked out in middle age. Sean's conviction was overturned in October 2023. Frank Pauline had been killed by another inmate in a New Mexico prison in 2015 before he could be exonerated. In February 2024, the Hawaii Innocence Project hired Indigo Solutions, which used forensic genetic genealogy to identify 57-year-old Albert Lauro Jr. as Unknown Male Number 1. Lauro lived in the Kapoho area, less than 2 miles from where Dana was found. He was an avid shore fisherman, familiar with the Waa Waa Trail. Police collected a discarded fork Lauro had used in public, and the DNA matched. On July 19, 2024, police obtained a cheek swab via search warrant. 4 days later, Lauro took his own life before being arrested. The real perpetrator had lived freely in the same small community for over 30 years, while 3 innocent men served decades behind bars. The Schweitzer brothers filed a federal civil rights lawsuit on January 21, 2025, naming Hawaii County and multiple detectives, alleging conspiracy, malicious prosecution, and fabrication of evidence. But while the Ireland case exposed catastrophic failures in the justice system, the next one revealed a man who built an entire career in law enforcement while hiding what he had done half a century earlier. Nancy Anderson. On January 7, 1972, at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, roommate Jody Spooner last saw 19-year-old Nancy Elaine Anderson with 2 door-to-door cutlery salesmen at their apartment at the Coral Terrace Apartments at 2222 Aloha Drive in Waikiki. Spooner went to take a nap. Around 4:15, she was awakened by a scream, but dismissed it. At approximately 5 in the evening, she discovered Nancy's body in the bathroom. Nancy had been struck 63 times with wounds to her neck, chest, stomach, back, sides, both arms, and legs. The cause was hemorrhage from a wound to the heart. There was no evidence of assault of a personal nature. The person responsible left a bloody towel near the body. Nancy Anderson was born November 10, 1952, in Bay City, Michigan, one of 10 children. Her father passed when the children were young, and their mother raised all 10 alone on whatever work she could find. After graduating high school, Nancy moved to Waikiki in October 1971 at age 19, hoping to enjoy island life before starting college. She lived at the Coral Terrace Apartments at 2222 Aloha Drive with roommate Jody Spooner. She worked at a local McDonald's and at Ala Moana Center. Family described her as very outgoing, very trusting, maybe to a fault. She had been in Hawaii for only 3 months when she was taken. The knife salesmen were investigated, but cleared through fingerprints and polygraphs. Former boyfriends and the property manager were also investigated without result. The case went cold for decades, one of Honolulu's oldest unsolved files. In 2019, Nancy's brother Jack Anderson, who had never stopped looking for answers, contacted genetic genealogist C.C. Moore of Parabon Nanolabs after learning about forensic genetic genealogy's role in solving the Golden State case. In 2020, Honolulu police enlisted Parabon, which used DNA phenotyping to predict the suspect was approximately 25 at the time, of Southern or Southeastern European descent, fair-skinned with brown or hazel eyes and dark hair. For the first time in nearly 50 years, investigators had a direction. In late 2021, police received a tip pointing to Tudor Chirila. In March 2022, police obtained DNA from Chirila's son John in California. Analysis showed John was very likely the biological offspring of the person whose DNA was on the bloody towel. On September 6, 2022, Reno police collected a saliva sample directly from Tudor Chirila. 2 days later, Chirila attempted to take his own life. On September 12th, the DNA match was confirmed. Chirila was arrested at a Reno hospital on September 13th. Tudor Chirila Jr. was approximately 27 at the time, working as a graduate assistant at the University of Hawaii, blocks from Nancy's apartment. What happened next is one of the most disturbing double lives in American legal history. After leaving Hawaii, Chirila attended law school, became a lawyer, and rose through the ranks to become Chief Deputy Attorney General of Nevada, the second highest law enforcement official in the state. He spent decades prosecuting others while carrying what he had done in that Waikiki apartment. He later ran for the Nevada Supreme Court in 1994 and was named in a 1998 federal indictment connected to a racketeering scheme. He was 77 at the time of his arrest. Chirila was extradited to Hawaii and pleaded not guilty to second-degree charges. At his arraignment, he appeared in a wheelchair, telling the judge, I want to go to Hawaii. It's so beautiful." It was a surreal moment in a case full of them. Trial was scheduled for March 2024, but on Christmas Day 2023, Chirila passed at age 78 from sepsis. The charge was dismissed and the case closed in April 2024. He would never face a jury. He would never answer for what happened in that Waikiki bathroom in 1972. This case is considered Hawaii's oldest cold case to result in an indictment. Nancy's 9 surviving siblings all outlived the man who took their sister. Brother Jack Anderson said, "We never sat around for 50 years waiting for a judge or someone to slam a gavel down and say guilty. We wanted to know who, and we now know who did this." For 50 years, a man who enforced the law for a living had walked free while 10 siblings from Bay City, Michigan, carried the weight of their sister's unsolved case. But while the Anderson case involved a suspect who built a legal career while hiding his past, the next one unfolded with witnesses just outside the door, including a young daughter waiting in a truck while her mother was taken from her. Thelma Boinville. On the afternoon of December 7, 2017, during the busy North Shore surf season on Oahu, 51-year-old Thelma Boinville went to a 2-story vacation home on Keiki Road in Pupukea to clean it as part of her side work maintaining rental properties. It was supposed to be a routine job. Her daughter, Makana, waited in her gold Toyota Tacoma outside, watching a film. Inside the home, 23-year-old Stephen Brown and his 20-year-old girlfriend, Haley Dandurand, had broken in through an unlocked window to burglarize the property. When Thelma surprised them, the pair attacked her with multiple implements. She suffered 31 injuries, including skull fractures. She was found with a plastic bag over her head, her hands and feet bound behind her back. Thelma Boinville was born February 4, 1966, in Brazil. She was a substitute teacher at Sunset Beach Elementary School on the North Shore, who helped Brazilian students transition to English, serving as a bridge between 2 cultures. She also cleaned vacation rental homes for extra income to support her family. Married to Kevin Emery, she had a daughter named Makana. She loved surfing, yoga, martial arts, and baking, and dreamed of opening a bakery with her daughter one day. She was beloved in both the North Shore and Brazilian communities, a woman who gave her time freely to anyone who needed help. Brown, who had dyed green hair, then went to the truck and grabbed Makana. The pair took Makana inside the home, restrained her upstairs, and left her bound. They stole the Toyota Tacoma and fled. An Australian tourist couple arriving at the rental discovered Thelma's body around 3 in the afternoon and called emergency services. Police found Makana alive upstairs. The scene inside the vacation home was one of the most disturbing investigators had encountered on the North Shore. A massive social media manhunt erupted almost immediately. Word spread across the island within hours. The stolen gold Toyota Tacoma was spotted by residents who shared updates in real time. Roughly 75 community members helped locate Brown and Dandurand at the Mililani Walmart parking lot that evening, surrounding them before police arrived. Dandurand was wearing Thelma's earrings and Makana's backpack. Thelma's bank card was in her shirt pocket. Brown, when officers tried to bag his hands for evidence, began licking blood from his hands, saying he knew what they were trying to do. It was a brazen attempt to destroy forensic evidence in front of the officers collecting it. After 28 trial postponements over nearly 5 years, separate trials were held. Brown was found guilty on all counts in January 2023. Dandurand was found guilty in August 2023. On December 6, 2023, the eve of the 6th anniversary of Thelma's passing, Judge Rowena Somerville sentenced Brown to life with the possibility of parole, plus consecutive decades for kidnapping and burglary, and Dandurand to 2 consecutive life sentences, plus 20 years. The judge called it one of the most heinous cases to occur in Hawaii. Brown's appeal was denied by the Hawaii Intermediate Court of Appeals on April 30, 2025. Thelma Boinville had gone to clean a vacation rental to earn extra income for her family. She walked through a door and encountered 2 strangers who had broken in looking for things to steal. Her daughter waited outside, watching a film, not knowing what was happening inside. But while the Boynville case was solved quickly through community action, the next one went undetected for weeks, hidden behind a locked door and hundreds of pounds of concrete. Gary Ruby. In mid-January 2022, 73-year-old Gary Ruby emailed friends and family about a new love interest named Juan, a young man from Colombia who now lives in Houston, whom he had apparently met through online dating. The man was Juan Tejedor Barron, 23, a Colombian national. According to Barron's confession, after an encounter with Ruby, he claimed Ruby revealed he was HIV positive, which enraged him. Prosecutors later stated Barron completely fabricated the HIV story, and the act was motivated by pure greed. Gary Ruby was born and raised in Montreal, Canada. He attended McGill University and became a lawyer before moving to Hawaii in the 1970s to work for the state. He had lived on the islands for decades and loved Hawaiian culture and the beach. In 2020, he purchased his dream home in the exclusive, gated Hawaii Loa Ridge community in East Oahu for approximately $2.195 million. The community sits high above the coast with panoramic views of the ocean. Ruby was described as mild-mannered, generous, and cultured, a man who had spent a lifetime building toward this home. His only sibling was older brother Lorne Ruby, a physician in Topeka, Kansas, who spoke to him regularly by phone. Barron placed a belt around Ruby's neck and tightened it. He then dragged Ruby to a standalone soaking bathtub in the master bedroom, used a kitchen knife to make wounds on Ruby's wrists to stage a self-inflicted scenario, then purchased bags of concrete from Lowe's and filled the bathtub, covering Ruby's body. He spread coffee grounds on top to mask the smell. The most disturbing revelation came from the medical examiner. Particles of cement were found in Ruby's lungs, meaning he was still alive and breathing when the concrete was poured over him. His brother Lorne said at sentencing, "You buried him alive." Barron then took over Ruby's home and began living as though the house were his own. He drove Ruby's $63,000 gold Audi A6 around Oahu, hosted parties at the property, used Ruby's money for bar tabs, shut off Ruby's social media accounts so no one could contact him, and presented himself to everyone he met as a wealthy homeowner. He even brought dating app matches back to the house, keeping the master bedroom permanently off limits and telling anyone who asked that the room was simply being renovated. For weeks, he lived freely in a gated community in one of Oahu's most exclusive neighborhoods, while Ruby lay encased in concrete in the next room. On March 7, 2022, Lorne Ruby called police for a wellness check after 3 weeks without contact. His brother Gary had simply stopped responding to calls, emails, and messages, which was completely unlike him. When officers arrived at the Hawaii Loa Ridge home, Barron answered the door and claimed he had bought the home years ago. But property records told a different story entirely. Officers entered and discovered the concrete-filled bathtub in the master bedroom. Ruby's body was excavated the next day. Barron fled the island immediately, heading to California. He was captured by the LAPD and U.S. Marshals in Anaheim, hiding in a crawl space under a bench on a Mexico-bound Greyhound bus, attempting to cross the border. He confessed during questioning, and during the interview, attempted to escape the interrogation room. After multiple delays and a guilty plea in March 2024, Barron attempted to withdraw his plea in September 2024, claiming language barriers had prevented him from understanding the proceedings. The motion was denied in May 2025. On July 30th, 2025, Judge Catherine Remigio sentenced Barron to life in prison with the possibility of parole, with a 20-year minimum for second-degree charges, plus concurrent terms for theft and identity theft. Ruby's family opposed the plea deal because it left parole as a possibility, meaning the man who encased their brother in concrete could one day walk free. Ruby's Hawaii Loa Ridge home was later sold for $2.57 million, the dream home he had purchased just 2 years before his passing. But while the Ruby case was eventually uncovered through a brother's concern, The next one has haunted investigators for 4 decades because the victim vanished in just 15 minutes, and her body has never been found. Diane Suzuki. On July 6, 1985, 19-year-old Diane Yayo Suzuki finished teaching a jazz class at the Rosalie Woodson Dance Academy in Aiya at approximately 3 in the afternoon. She spent about 5 minutes helping a dance academy photographer, later identified as Dewey Hamasaki, move equipment. At approximately 3:15, another instructor waiting in the parking lot went upstairs to look for Diane. She was gone. Her car, keys, and purse were all left behind. The person responsible had only a 15-minute window to act and conceal any evidence. Close to 1,000 volunteers searched Oahu in the days that followed. Diane's body has never been found. Diane Suzuki was the youngest of 5 daughters born to Masaharu Suzuki, a World War II Army veteran who served in the famed 442nd Infantry Regiment, and Yuri Suzuki. Standing 4 feet 11 inches and weighing 109 pounds, she was a dance instructor at the Mihitsun Academy, a student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and a rainbow dancer. She was 19 years old. She had a high school sweetheart of 3 years and was described as an amazing, extraordinary, positive light by everyone who knew her. She had her whole life ahead of her. The case stalled as a missing person investigation for more than 5 years until November 14, 1990, when police returned to the dance academy with luminol, a chemical that reacts with trace amounts of blood invisible to the naked eye. It was the first time the Honolulu Police Department had ever used this technology in a case. What they found changed everything. They detected significant blood evidence in the upstairs bathroom of the dance studio. The floor had been retiled since 1985, but blood had seeped beneath the new tiles over the years, creating visible patterns underneath that told their own story about what had happened in that room. The case was immediately reclassified from missing person to homicide. The prime suspect was photographer Dewey Hamasaki. He failed a polygraph test and had unexplained fingernail scratches on his torso that he could not account for. He gave inconclusive answers during questioning. Retired HPD Lieutenant Gary Diaz later said, "I'll put my whole career, 30 years, that this is what happened. He did it." A critical failure occurred on the night of the luminol search. Police prepared a warrant to search a marsh behind a Pearl City home owned by Hamasaki's family, but the warrant was denied. It took 8 months to obtain approval. 8 months during which whoever was responsible had time to act. When police finally searched the property, an Army identification specialist found what appeared to be a grave that had been disturbed. The soil recently turned and the ground surface uneven, suggesting the remains may have been moved during the delay. In October 1993, a grand jury heard more than 300 hours of testimony, but declined to indict. Without a body, prosecutors could not establish when or how Diane passed, and without that, they could not build a case that would survive in court. Hamasaki was never charged. The case remains officially open and unsolved. Both of Diane's parents passed without seeing justice or learning what happened to their youngest daughter. Hawaii News Now aired a 40th anniversary documentary on July 8, 2025, featuring Diane's boyfriend's first ever television interview after 4 decades of silence. Cold case experts have advocated for retesting blood evidence using modern DNA technology and genetic genealogy. The case led to legislative reforms overhauling Hawaii's harassment and stalking laws. Diane Suzuki vanished in 15 minutes from a dance studio in broad daylight, and 40 years later, no one has been held accountable. The blood beneath the tiles told a story. The marsh behind the house may have held the rest, but the 8-month delay may have erased it forever. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. But while the Suzuki case was derailed by a denied warrant and an 8-month delay, the next one was undermined by a botched crime scene, a destroyed exhumation, and critical evidence that may now be permanently lost. Lisa Au. On January 20th, 1982, a night of flooding rain on Oahu, 19-year-old Lisa Au finished work at the Susan Beers Salon in Kailua around 9 in the evening and drove to her boyfriend's sister's apartment in Makiki for dinner. After dinner, she and her boyfriend, Doug Holmes, left around 12:30 to 12:45 in the morning on January 21st. Lisa called her roommate Candy to say she was heading home. That was the last time anyone heard from her alive. Lisa Au was a hairdresser who had attended Trendsetters Beauty College. Of Chinese, Hawaiian, and European descent, she lived in Kailua with her roommate Candy. She was dating University of Hawaii student Doug Holmes and had received her driver's license just 2 days before she vanished. Her father Chester had helped her buy a 1976 Toyota so she could have her own wheels and her own independence for the first time. She was described as always a happy girl with big dreams. She was 19 years old and had just started driving on her own. The night she disappeared was one of the first times she had driven alone at night in bad weather. When Lisa failed to return home, Holmes found her Toyota on the highway shoulder near Manawili. The driver's window was rolled halfway down. 2 to 3 inches of water covered the floor and the seat was soaked. But her purse on the seat was completely dry, suggesting it was placed there after the rain stopped, not during the storm. Her keys and wallet were inside, but her temporary driver's license and vehicle registration were missing. The car had been wiped clean of evidence. Someone had taken the time to remove traces of what happened. On January 31st, 1982, after a 10-day search involving hundreds of volunteers and 150,000 distributed flyers, a jogger found Lisa's body on Tantalus Drive, face down in a ravine, approximately 40 feet down an embankment. Advanced decomposition prevented the medical examiner from determining the exact cause. The case was classified as homicide. 2 primary theories emerged and would dominate the investigation for years. The first was what became known as the officer theory, which stemmed from witnesses reporting a car with blue flashing grille lights following Lisa's vehicle that night on the rain-soaked highway. The missing temporary license was interpreted as evidence she had been pulled over by someone impersonating law enforcement or by an actual officer. An HPD officer became the prime suspect, and a grand jury was convened to hear evidence. But prosecutor Charles Marsland could not secure an indictment, and the investigation stalled. The officer filed a $20 million lawsuit against a television station and former police officials for publicly associating him with the case. Doug Holmes was the other focus. He failed 2 polygraph tests, had scratches on his face when he reported finding Lisa's car, was reportedly trying to end the relationship, and a security guard named Thomas Thornburg, who was never initially contacted by police, witnessed the couple in a heated exchange that night. Holmes explained the polygraph failures by saying he felt guilty about letting her drive alone in bad weather. Private investigator Bert Cornell, hired by the O family, found critical evidence the original team missed. He located Lisa's missing temporary license at a grocery store where she had stopped to buy Coke on her way to dinner, entirely debunking the officer theory. She had simply left it at the counter. Cornell also discovered the Thornburg witness and a newspaper delivery driver who saw a man driving with an unconscious female passenger near Tantalus around 2:30 in the morning. In 1983, when Lisa's body was exhumed for a second autopsy, investigators found her remains still in the original police body bag, unwashed, with leaves and debris still clinging to her. No proper examination had been conducted before burial. Her skull and jawbone were sent to the LA County coroner, but their current location is now disputed between HPD and the medical examiner's office. The case remains open and unsolved. Both of Lisa's parents passed without knowing who took their daughter. Holmes, now living in Australia, issued a 2019 statement saying Lisa and her memory deserve justice. No one has ever been arrested or charged. 43 years later, Lisa Au's case remains Oahu's most haunting unsolved file. But while the Au case has gone decades without answers, the next one was solved through physical evidence so disturbing it left even experienced investigators shaken. Charlie Scott. On the evening of February 9, 2014, 27-year-old Carly Joanne Charlie Scott left her family's home in Haiku, Maui after dinner. She was 5 months pregnant with a boy she planned to name Joshua Aiden Scott. Around 8:30 that evening, her ex-boyfriend, Stephen Capobianco, 24, called asking her to help him after his truck allegedly broke down on Hana Highway near Kianai. Despite the late hour and her condition, Charlie agreed to help. She drove her Toyota 4Runner with her dog Nala along the winding Hana Highway into the dark. Her phone last pinged at 10:56 in the evening at the Kianai Peninsula, a remote and isolated location on the coast that her family said she would never go voluntarily, especially at night while pregnant. After that ping, her phone went silent. Charlie Scott was born November 24, 1986, in California. She was a Maui resident who worked at the Hui No'o Visual Arts Center and was pursuing cosmetology certification. She was 5 months along and looking forward to becoming a mother. She had already chosen a name for her son, Joshua Aiden Scott. The biological father was Capobianco, but their relationship had ended months earlier. She was building a new life for herself and her unborn son on Maui, moving forward without him. Capobianco, however, had other plans. Over the following days, the search for Charlie produced increasingly disturbing findings. Nala, her dog, was found at the Nahiku marketplace 25 miles from where her phone last pinged, wandering alone without her owner. Charlie's Toyota 4Runner was discovered burned, overturned, and stripped at Peahi, near the surf spot known as Jaws. The vehicle had been set on fire in what appeared to be a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence. On February 13th, 4 days after Charlie vanished, her sister found blood-stained clothing in a remote area off Nua'ailua Bay, in an area Capobianco had specifically told searchers was unnecessary to check. The fact that he directed people away from the very spot where evidence was found would become a devastating detail at trial. The next day, police discovered what amounted to the most disturbing evidence collection in recent Maui history. 5 fingernails, 2 jawbone fragments, a tongue piercing with flesh still attached, skin fragments, clumps of red hair, a maggot-infested blanket, and a black maternity skirt with at least 20 punctures just under the waistband. The jawbone was positively identified through dental records as Charlie's. Her full body was never recovered. Capobianco failed a polygraph, gave inconsistent stories about the night, spoke of Charlie in the past tense during a television interview just days after her disappearance, and appeared cold and unemotional during questioning. Surveillance footage from businesses along Hana Highway contradicted his timeline claims and placed him in locations he denied visiting. His motive was clear. He did not want to be a father at 24 and had pressured Charlie to end the pregnancy. When she refused, he began looking for another way out. His girlfriend Cassandra Kupstas told him she did not want to be a stepmother, adding pressure from the other side. Charlie stood between Capobianco and the life he wanted, and he decided to remove her from it. Capobianco was arrested on July 18, 2014, 5 months after Charlie vanished. His trial lasted over 7 months, with 75 prosecution witnesses across 55 days, making it one of the longest trials in Maui County history. On December 28, 2016, the jury found him guilty of second-degree charges and second-degree arson, agreeing the acts were especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. He was sentenced on March 24, 2017, to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 10 consecutive years for arson. The Hawaii Paroling Authority set minimum terms totaling 50 years before parole eligibility. His appeals were exhausted in July 2021 when the Hawaii Supreme Court declined review. Capobianco is incarcerated at Saguaro Correctional Center in Eloy, Arizona. He will not be eligible for parole until he is in his 70s. But while the Scott case was driven by a man trying to escape fatherhood, the next one was orchestrated through coded text messages by a husband who wanted his wife gone for insurance money. Catherine Walker. On the night of November 14, 2014, at the Aliamanu Military Reservation in Honolulu, 38-year-old Catherine Walker was asleep in her bed. Her husband Michael was at work, or so she believed. Around midnight, someone entered through the back door of her home using a key that had been deliberately left in the gravel outside for this purpose. The intruder grabbed a kitchen knife from the Walker kitchen, went upstairs, and struck Catherine multiple times in the neck and torso as she slept. During the act, the intruder asked Catherine if she forgave her. Catherine, in her final moments, replied, "Yes." The intruder stayed for 30 minutes afterward to make sure Catherine was gone. Catherine Walker, born Catherine Plotz, grew up in Albany, New York. She was a devout Mormon recognized as a standout youth leader who loved music, dance, and animals. She married Michael Walker in 2003 and lived with him at the military reservation in Honolulu. After nearly a decade of trying to have a family, including repeated losses that devastated them both, the couple was about to begin fertility treatment at the time of her passing. Catherine believed she and Michael were finally going to become parents. What she did not know was that her husband had been planning her end for months, carrying on affairs while she focused on building the family she had always wanted. Michael Walker was an Army sergeant and medic at Tripler Army Medical Center. He was a self-described individual with compulsive behavior who had multiple affairs and solicited encounters through online platforms. In September 2014, just 2 months before the act, he met Ailsa Lisa Jackson, 24, through a dating site. Within 2 weeks of meeting her, Walker asked Jackson to take his wife's life. He wanted Catherine gone but could not pursue a divorce because he stood to collect $400,000 in life insurance. The insurance payout was his priority. Catherine was simply in the way. They devised a coded text system that would allow them to communicate without using direct language. Good meant enter through the window. Bad meant use the key left in the gravel near the back door. They called each other Daddy Cakes and Baby Girl. Walker's code phrase for wanting his wife gone was deepest desire. The texts between them read like a relationship conversation on the surface, but every word carried a second meaning. On the night of November 14th, Walker texted Jackson one word: bad. He then went to work his night shift at Tripler's emergency room to establish an alibi, tending to patients while Jackson walked to the Walker home and carried out the plan. Walker discovered his wife's body the next morning and called it in, initially trying to suggest she had harmed herself. But the scene did not match that narrative. Investigators became suspicious almost immediately after finding extensive activity on adult platforms on his phone, revealing a double life Catherine never knew about. He eventually admitted to affairs, but placed all responsibility for Catherine's passing squarely on Jackson, calling her a frickin' psycho and portraying himself as a victim of a deranged woman. Catherine's sister Julie Plotz, devastated but determined, agreed to make FBI directed recorded phone calls to Walker, trying to elicit incriminating statements. She acted as though she believed his version of events while investigators listened to every word, waiting for him to contradict himself. Jackson pleaded guilty to first-degree charges in December 2015 and cooperated fully against Walker, providing prosecutors with the text messages, the coded language, and the full timeline of how the plan was developed. Walker pleaded guilty to second-degree charges of aiding and abetting in September 2019. On February 10, 2020, U.S. District Judge Susan Oki Mulway sentenced Walker to 35 years and Jackson to 30 years in federal prison. The judge deliberately gave Walker the longer sentence, stating, "Ms. Jackson wielded the knife, but it does appear to me that you were in control, that she did what she did because you wanted her to, and you knew she had mental health problems." Jackson had been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and was off her medication at the time due to a gap in health insurance coverage. But while the Walker case was solved through text messages and a sister's bravery, the next one was cracked in just 2 days by a genetic genealogist working from the other side of the country. Lisa Fracassi. Lisa Ann Lika Fracassi was last seen alive in the early morning hours of October 31st, 1994. On November 3rd, a maid delivering towels to her apartment at 415 Nawa Street in Waikiki discovered her body. A "Do Not Disturb" sign had been on the door for days. The person responsible had stuffed a sheet in her mouth and strangled her with a telephone cord. A used prophylactic, a cigarette butt, and fingerprints from the telephone were collected as evidence. No one in the building reported hearing anything suspicious. For nearly 3 decades, the case sat in the files with no leads and no suspects. Lisa Fracassi was 37 years old, born June 29, 1957, in Niagara Falls, New York, to Ernest and Gloria Fracassi. An honors student who graduated Niagara Falls High School in 1975, she earned a nursing degree from Broward College in Florida and worked as a registered nurse at University Hospital in Fort Lauderdale. She was a trained medical professional who had spent years caring for others. After moving to Hawaii in 1990, she worked as an exotic dancer at a Waikiki nightclub while saving money to return to nursing school and resume her medical career. She was also a certified lifeguard. She was described as a caring person who would sit for hours with people who needed help. She lived alone in the Nahua Street apartment and kept to herself. The case went cold for decades. Lisa Fracassi's name faded from the newspapers. No one was arrested. No one was charged. The evidence sat in storage in Honolulu while the years passed. Then HPD's restructured cold case unit and the Aole Poina, or Never Forgotten Project, launched in 2018, began re-examining the department's oldest unsolved cases with modern forensic technology. The program was specifically designed to give names to the unknown perpetrators in Hawaii's coldest files. Crucially, HPD had begun using updated, contamination-resistant DNA storage methods in 1993, the year before Fracassi's passing, which meant the biological evidence had been preserved well enough for 21st century testing. That 1-year difference in storage protocol may have saved the entire case. In 2020, HPD engaged Parabon Nanolabs, the same firm that had helped crack the Nancy Anderson case in Honolulu. Renowned genetic genealogist C.C. Moore received the Fracassi case file in October 2020 and identified the suspect in just 2 days by comparing crime scene DNA to public genealogy databases, specifically GED Match. 2 days. That was all it took for the technology to accomplish what 26 years of traditional police work could not. Moore built a family tree from the DNA match, narrowed down the candidates, and arrived at a name. In March 2021, HPD matched fingerprints taken from Cecil H. Trent after his passing to the fingerprint from the crime scene telephone. DNA from a close relative then confirmed the prophylactic and cigarette butt evidence also matched Trent. Every piece of biological evidence in the apartment pointed to one man. Cecil H. Trent was 29 at the time. He passed in 2013 in Honolulu of congestive heart failure at age 48. He was never a suspect during the original investigation, and his connection to Fracassi remains entirely unknown. Investigators have not been able to determine how they knew each other, or whether they knew each other at all. He had been gone for nearly a decade before anyone knew his name belonged on this case. He lived and passed in the same city where Lisa was taken, and no one ever connected the two until a genealogist on the mainland made the link in 48 hours. On April 14, 2022, HPD announced the case was solved and cleared by exception due to Trent's passing. No trial was possible. No courtroom. No verdict. C.C. Moore said, "We won't see justice in this case since he can't be arrested and tried, but hopefully it provides some answers to those who cared about her and loved her." Lisa Fracassi waited 28 years for someone to speak her name in connection with the person who ended her life. When it finally happened, it took 2 days. But while the Fracassi case was solved by a genealogist in 2 days, the final case on this list began on a birthday trip to paradise and ended on a Waikiki beach before dawn. Brianna Antone. On the evening of October 1st, 2009, 25-year-old Brianna Antone and her younger brother Benjamin were walking near the Royal Hawaiian Center in Waikiki when they met Aaron Michael Souza, 31, and another man named Drake Garcia. Souza told them he had just got out of jail that day. He had been released from the federal detention center that morning after serving 4 months for a parole matter. The group bought liquor and went to the Antone's hotel room to drink and smoke together. Brianna Antone was a member of the Navajo Nation from Rio Rancho, New Mexico, a film student at the College of Santa Fe and aspiring actress. She had worked on several productions in her home state and was building a career in front of the camera. Friend Kim Gleason described her as having great stage presence and wanting to be known for that. She was in Honolulu celebrating her 25th birthday, a gift from her mother, who was attending the American Dental Association convention at the same time. Her younger brother Benjamin was traveling with her, so she would have family by her side. It was her first trip to Hawaii, and she had been looking forward to it for months. She had arrived in paradise to celebrate a milestone birthday and was looking forward to everything the islands had to offer. After 1 a.m. on October 2nd, Souza and Brianna left the hotel together and went to the beach near the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. Souza later claimed they had a consensual encounter in the water and got into a disagreement over a missing purse. But Royal Hawaiian Hotel workers witnessed a man on top of a woman, striking and choking her near a concrete wall on the beach. Just before dawn, a jogger found Brianna's body on the shoreline fronting the Royal Hawaiian. The medical examiner found she had drowned, with a fractured thyroid and larynx, bruised neck and chest, and ligature marks. Near the body, police found a manila envelope containing gold slippers confirmed as Brianna's and a letter addressed to Souza at the Federal Detention Center. Police found Souza hiding in bushes in the Makiki neighborhood on October 5th, 3 days after Brianna was found on the beach. He had apparently consumed a cleaning product in an attempt to harm himself and was hospitalized before his arrest. His DNA, already on file from a 2005 conviction, matched samples from Antone's body. A fellow prisoner named Colin later testified that Souza made incriminating statements in their shared cell, describing in detail what he had done on the beach that night. The testimony was graphic and left little doubt about what had occurred between Souza and Brianna in the hours before dawn. Souza's trial, before Circuit Judge Dexter Del Rosario, concluded on November 7, 2011, when a jury found him guilty of second-degree charges after 4 days of deliberation. A contested point during the trial was that the deputy medical examiner had originally classified the manner of passing as undetermined rather than homicide, but the court excluded this earlier classification from the jury's consideration, a decision that would become the central issue in Souza's appeal. On February 15, 2012, Souza was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, with a mandatory minimum of 10 years as a repeat offender. The Hawaii Intermediate Court of Appeals reviewed his arguments and affirmed the conviction in February 2015, finding that the trial court had not erred. Souza's prosecution raised systemic questions about Hawaii's approach to repeat offenders. He had been incarcerated 7 times since 2006 for violations related to substance issues. 7 times in 3 years. Each time he was released, he reoffended. Each time he reoffended, he was sent back. And each time he was sent back, he was eventually released again. On the morning of October 1st, 2009, the system released him one final time. And within hours, he had encountered Brianna Antone on a Waikiki sidewalk. Brianna had traveled thousands of miles from New Mexico to celebrate her 25th birthday in Hawaii. Her mother had given her the trip as a gift. Her brother was with her to share the experience. She spent her last evening on a Waikiki beach with a man who had walked out of a detention facility that same morning. She never made it to her birthday. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.